Hello, hello, one and all. Welcome to a very special edition of Clubhouse Live. I'm Heidi McDowell, your AAC Events Director, and tonight we are celebrating the 15-year career of our outgoing CEO, Phil Powers. I've had the pleasure of knowing Phil for going on 8 years now. And during this time, he thanked me when I was a volunteer, making me feel like a valued part of the AAC community. He encouraged me to apply for an opening at the club, one that I didn't think I was qualified for. And he supported my professional development, encouraging me and at times forcing me to be the best that I could be. And through it all, I've been lucky to call him a friend. I know that I am not alone in saying Phil has had a significant impact on my life. In fact, tonight we will hear from special guests who have been impacted by Phil or who have been part of his 15-year journey at the helm of the American Alpine Club. Now, ladies and gentlemen, the man of the hour, or as we like to joke around the office, the man who runs Climbing in America, Phil Powers.
Okay, I think, yeah, there I am. Can you hear me? I won't take much time. I will say, let's see, what's this say? Okay. I will say that, one of the things I always fault myself for is not planning things well enough in advance. And then when I decided to leave the club a year ago almost, it was one of the most well-planned, orchestrated things I've ever put together. Unfortunately, I planned it out too far because here we are in the middle of a pandemic, having already had a virtual annual benefit dinner, and now we're having virtual going away parties. So I feel like I overplanned this one. I'm not gonna belabor anything right now. I think a lot of history and good times and tough times will come out over the course of the next hour or so. So with that, I'll turn it over to Heidi and whoever she's lined up to attack me first.
Well, 1+ to the virtual send-off, although I know it's not as ideal as celebrating in person, is the fact that we've been able to bring together a super special lineup of guests, people who are tuning in from all over the country to celebrate you, Phil. Our first guest of the evening is Steve Schwartz. He is the president of Chalkstone Pictures and former AAC board member. Steve, thanks for joining us.
Hi, Steve.
Hey, Phil. Hi, everybody. I think I'm up first because my Phil story is about the before time, 2005. The AAC looking for a new executive director, and the board picking 3 people to screen candidates: Mark Ritchie, who's also here tonight, Jim and Sarah, and me. I got picked because I happened to live in the same neighborhood as Mark and Jim outside of Boston. So I was the convenience pick. Anyway, the way the process worked, which I'm sure Phil will remember, is that the candidate would fly into Boston on a Friday and he'd spend the weekend at Mark's house. Teresa, Mark's wife, who we saw a moment ago, she was a saint. But the real business took place on Friday nights, where we'd interview the candidate over a nice dinner, several bottles. And I call it an interview, but it was really more of an interrogation, bordering on abuse, maybe. Phil, I don't know if you remember it that way, or maybe you chose to forget. But anyway, I really looked forward to those Friday nights. It was a lot of fun for the 3 of us, however unpleasant it probably was for the candidate. But it was the high point of my week. I just looked forward to Friday night and those interviews. Anyway, I was when you showed up on Friday, I actually became very depressed because I realized that those fun Fridays were about to end because you were so obviously the perfect candidate. It's hard to hire executives, especially in nonprofit area, because, generally speaking, you don't get paid that much. So you have to be motivated by a higher purpose. And in your case, you certainly were. It was clear that you had more concern for the climbing community than you did about feathering your own nest, which was, we were the lucky beneficiaries of that. One measure of your success is when we hired you, we had 5,000 members. And today, at a time when a lot of health organizations are struggling, we have 25,000 members, a five-fold increase, and that's a tribute to you and the great team that you assembled. So hats off to you, Phil, helmets off, and whatever your next adventure may be, we know it'll be a great one. Climb on.
Cheers, Steve. And I have to say, the other thing I remember from those days is doing a video interview with you from Kyle Lefkoff's office up in Boulder. And I was diligently sitting there for my video interview, which took place before the Friday evening. And this bearded hippie guy with macaroni and cheese in his hand kept appearing in the video and disappearing and appearing. And I finally said, "Are you the AV tech?" He said, "No, I'm Steve Schwartz." And you sat down and gave me the business.
Yeah, well, you deserved it. Yeah.
Thanks, Steve. I can't wait to see you out in Southern California.
I can't wait to see you.
So interesting to hear about Phil's early days at the club. Sounds like you made quite the splash when you came on board as president or as our CEO. I think we have some old clippings that we dug up that are a testament to that. Some articles from Rock and Ice and some newspapers talking about you coming on board. Our next guest is a name many of you are familiar with, Mark Ritchie. He served as board president of the American Alpine Club and is now here tonight to continue the celebration of Phil and his career. Welcome aboard, Mark. I think you might have your mute on still.
There we go.
There you go.
Yeah, I can't see anything though, but you can hear me, right?
I can see you and we can hear you. Yeah.
Oh, really?
Yeah, you don't look that great, but
already you're at, let's see, do I have to click something so I can see, or no?
I think you're fine if you just want to roll with
All
it.
right, I'll just, I don't need to see myself, but I was hoping to see you, Phil. Well, first of all, I just want to say congratulations. It's a bittersweet time for so many of us because of all you've done for the club. You've had an amazing career. You've done so much for us, and you've been a great friend. But I also want to say that what many probably don't realize is that when Phil came on, and I think that was in 2003, if I'm not mistaken, because
Five.
Oh, it was 2005. Okay, that's right. I started serving as president as 2003. The club was actually in some disarray. It was we were without an executive director. We had an interim executive director, but we were kind of rudderless. We were there was a lot of bickering going on in the club. We were kind of polarized and definitely not getting much done. And frankly, it wasn't that much fun. And one of the first things you did, Phil, and everyone knows this, is you were really able to turn that around and just get us focused and united again. And I mean, we are very grateful for that because the club really needed it at that time. And I mean, partly, I think it was just because everyone liked you so much, but also you were just really good at your job. And you had obviously worked in nonprofit, but your passion for climbing was, I think, the thing that really helped people rally around the club again and get us going in the right direction. And certainly for me, it made my job a lot easier, and I'm thankful for that. And in no small part, your climbing background, I think, was a big part of that. And we had all agreed when we were searching that, we wanted, at least my group was adamant that we were going to choose an executive director who was part of our tribe, who was the real thing, a real climber. But I had no idea. And I got to say, when I didn't know you before we hired you. And when I read your resume the first time, and I was just blown away. I couldn't believe it. He not only had you climbed K2 without bottled oxygen, but you'd red pointed 513. And both things that I, would never, well, I did climb 513, but I always wanted to climb K2. And I just couldn't believe it. I mean, I didn't know anybody else who'd done that. And I was, we were all very impressed.
In the same month, Mark, in the same month.
In the same month, which in the time, I don't know if there was any other American who had done that. Maybe there was, I'm sure since there's been a few, but it's a pretty select group. You probably know the answer to that, but it's a very elite group of people. What's that?
There's got to be 1 million by now.
Well, I wouldn't say 1 million, but there's probably a bunch of Japanese and Europeans, but not many Americans, I bet. So anyhow, kudos to you, man. I mean, that's impressive. But so that was really important. We knew we had, the right guy in so many ways, and you were able to inspire not just the membership, but young climbers and avid climbers and people who were just getting into it. And it was a huge part, I think, of the success for our club in those years. But I also want to finish up on a sort of a different story. And you did so much for me and the rest of the club, but a story that few may know is when you saved me from being arrested or possibly even thrown in jail one night on my 50th birthday party, which I'm sure you remember well. I probably don't remember it quite as well as you do, but it was a raucous event. And there was a lot of people there from all over the country and even from around the world. And we were really partying good and we were loud. And at some point, the police showed up. And
3 times.
I may have been, I was certainly indignant that they were breaking up my party as a longstanding resident of the community, and probably a bit belligerent and very, very drunk. And so they ordered me to go get my documents. And while doing so, Phil had a word with the police chief. It was the chief, I think, who showed up. And he said, "Now listen, Mark is really drunk. And he's probably going to come down and say something really stupid. So just let's take a step back here." And
let's be ready for that.
And I don't quite remember what happened after that, but I've heard that there might have been a policeman's flashlight got knocked to the ground. I don't know, but whatever did happen.
By you.
But you diffused the situation, and for that I'm forever grateful. And the party did go on, by the way, and I do remember the rest of it. So thank you for that. Thank you for your incredible work for climbers, and of course for our club, but for all climbers. And thank you for your friendship. And although I'm going to miss you as our executive director, I, in a selfish way, have an idea that I might actually see more of you if you're moving back to Vermont. So I'm happy for that. Thank you, Phil.
Yeah, I think that's true. Thanks, Mark.
Mark, thank you. I love the praise of Phil's accomplishments, but I think even more so, I love the stories that involve cops. So thank you for that. It's always fun to hear those. Next in our incredible lineup of special guests tonight, we have Kit Delaurier, who is a pro ski athlete, author of Higher Love, Skiing the Seven Summits, and a former American Alpine Club board member. Kit, welcome to the celebration. All right.
Nope, there's pictures.
On the screen are some photos that Kit sent from a trip that she and Phil had.
Oh, I'm back. I'm here now.
Excellent.
I told you it was taking a while to decide to upgrade me to panelist. All right. So Phil and I both call Jackson, Wyoming home. Me full-time, him part-time. And back when Phil invited me to join the board, I remember we were off on a hike up Snow King. And I really appreciated that about him, that it wasn't like, let's sit down and have coffee. It's like, let's move our bodies and talk. And at the time, I remember thinking, you know, I'm a ski mountaineer. Although I've been a member of the AAC since back in the day when I had to have, you know, people vouch for me, and it was very much the old white man's club. I still didn't feel like what my chosen mountain craft was really that much a part of the AAC. And now look at us, it's like 7 years later probably. And so I really want to commend Phil for, like, it's not only can we include ski mountaineering now, it's like seriously this work that has brought so much inclusion into our climbing community. I really, really applaud you for that work. And it seems really silly to look back on that question I had. And in that questionable time, I remember asking Phil when I finally decided to join, because I put it off a year because I thought I was too busy and I wasn't so sure. And then I decided I wanted in. And I remember asking Phil, hey, how long are you actually going to do this job? Because I selfishly didn't really want to be a part of having to replace you. And I did look forward to working with you, but I certainly didn't want to have that burden because you'd be so difficult to replace. And at that time, you said 5 years. So I'm going to actually call you out on the part about not planning well enough in advance, because it actually was just 6 years. So I think that I really actually applaud like that piece of you that thinks ahead and that is yet then in the moment, because I think that's something that we as climbers all have to have, and even more so as leaders. And for me, also being somebody who values time with my family and time doing what I love so much, I also applaud you for that, because I've noticed you doing that, and that was like a big part of you stepping back. And then the last story I want to share is the one day that you and I did get to spend together, just the two of us, in our home backyard of the Tetons. And I was getting ready to go on a trip to Makalu, I think, and you were getting ready to spend the day up high with 60 Minutes. So you needed to train and get some altitude time in. And I just wanted to keep walking and stay fit. And I remember in the dark on the early morning approach, you know, you listened when I was like, I don't even know if I want to go. And you were really clear and said, just make sure you come home, you know, make all the right decisions. And I'll never forget that. And that was actually a tough decision that I did have to make on that trip, because I did come home early. You didn't let me lead a single pitch that day, but we had a good time. And we had this free hanging rappel, I remember. And, you know, at the time it was like, hey, I do this all the time, whatever. And I never used a rappel backup. And you were like, do you use a rappel backup? And I'm like, no. And you're like, well, would you please? And so I actually do most of the time these days. So, you know, thanks for walking the talk, Phil.
Thank you, Kit. I remember all those days. Yeah. And I'm glad you did come back. And I think it's a big deal that, you know, the AAC is the club for all climbers, whether they climb up to ski down or climb up to rappel down or climb up to jump off. I don't mean that. I mean, jump off with like a parachute or something. Thank you.
Thank you.
I, for one, am very glad you joined the board, Kit. Thank you for your service to the club.
Thank you.
Next
I've got
up,
a peanut gallery here in the background. Sarah and Zach are here. Gus will be home shortly, but they're back here applauding.
oh, cute. The whole fam's on board.
Yeah.
Next up, we have a special surprise for you, Phil. This you don't know is happening, but we reached out to some folks who weren't able to make it to the live event tonight or had other obligations. And so we have some special quotes to share with you. The first one is from Jim McCarthy. And he wrote, Phil's tenure at AAC encompassed the most tumultuous period in AAC history. He brought us through with grace and acumen. He also presided over the most fantastic membership expansion in our history. Fare thee well, Jim McCarthy.
Nice.
And next in our lineup of live guests, we have self-described desert rat, but more accurately, the man when it comes to climbing in the desert, Jim Danini, who has racked up quite the tick list of desert first ascents. Also, fun fact, Jim is joining us live on his birthday. So Jim, thanks for being here, but more importantly, happy birthday.
Happy birthday, Jim.
You 77. Oh my God. I knew I was always hoping I'd get to be this old. I just thought it would take longer. Anyway, I want to thank Steve Schwartz and Mark Ritchie for the yeoman task that they did in getting Phil to be the CEO of the club over the last 15 years. 15 years that I regard as the most important in the history of the Alpine Club. Yeah, I'm 77, so I can remember way back in climbing and also in the Alpine Club. And I was one of the old boys when it was an old boys club. And under Phil's direction, it's become much more inclusive, much more diverse, and much better with advocacy. And I think the diversity is mostly noticeable in gender and in age. We have a lot of younger climbers and, that are really enjoying the club and getting a lot out of it. And I think Phil was, the membership has soared, but to me, it's even more important in who the members are. And I want to thank you for that, Phil. I think that's a wonderful thing that happened. And, I got back from Patagonia in March, just as this weird, strange thing happened. And so my wife and I I'm in my little 15-foot teardrop right now up in Kalispell, Montana. And we've been self-isolating ourselves in various wilderness areas around the Western United States. So I've been out of touch with AAC events and I haven't really talked to Phil, but I want to thank you, Phil, for making my task as my 3 years as president so easy. I don't think I could have done it with anyone else at the helm. And I want to thank you for what you've done for the club. I think it's really special. And desert was mentioned. So now that you have more time off, hopefully, you can climb with me in the desert somewhere or anywhere else. I'd love to climb with you. But keep in mind that I can tell you that 77 is a lot different from 70. So I'm getting to that point where I only use one climbing command. Up rope, I'm not moving. So be thanks a lot.
Paul.
And I hope to see you soon.
Yeah, you'll see me in the desert for sure, Jim. Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks for joining us, birthday boy. And next we have a special quote from Dawa Sherpa, who is unable to join us because it is currently 5 a.m. In Nepal. So she sends her regards and this lovely quote, Namaste from Kathmandu, Nepal. I just want to say that I really appreciate the long time ago you agreed to meet up with me in Telluride, Colorado. And then I really appreciate all your guidance and mentoring you provided me over the years. And of course, it was honored to meet up with your family and get close to them as well. As a mountain guide, I know you and I will cross path over and over again. And I look forward to seeing those moments. Thank you so much and take care. Dawa Sherpa.
Oh, that's sweet. That's nice.
If you are just joining us, tonight we are celebrating our outgoing executive director, Phil Powers. After 15 years of being at the helm of the American Alpine Club, he's moving on to greener pastures, or perhaps it's more apropos to say moving on to better rock. But be sure you all stay tuned. We have a special lineup of guests who will be joining us. And at the end, we're doing a live Q&A with Phil. So this will be your chance to ask him some questions. Next up, we have Cody Smith joining us here in our virtual celebration. Cody is a former AAC board member and current head of the AAC's lodging committee. He is a climber of 14ers and a collector of art. Cody, welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Well, thank you. What a group. I'm glad to be part of it. So Phil was just barely on the job when he and I met.
We lost your audio, Cody.
So let's try that. So when I met Phil, he had just taken the job at the AAC and was in transition trying to figure that out. And I was just getting ready to transition out of a career in New York City to come back home to Denver. And I thought one of the things that would be rewarding or at least fun to do would be to spend some time on American Alpine Club matters. And Phil and I tried to figure out where that might make sense. And we ended up on the topic of huts and lodging, which at the time was a relatively simple thing for the club. We managed the Grand Teton Climbers Ranch in the Tetons, a wonderful facility. Hopefully, most of you have been there, and the rest of you, once this summer of isolating is over, will get there. But Phil's point of view was, which I shared, was that these facilities can be great places for fellowship, for stewardship, for education, and for storytelling. And so we set about with longtime Huts member Travis Spitzer, and with Phil's help, and with a cast of characters really over the last 14 years. And my count's not exact, but I can off the top of my head think of 12 different states that Phil and I have been in together, bird dogging, lodging, camping type possibilities. And I think it's safe to say that Phil never met a topography that he couldn't figure out how to have fun in or with, whether it's climbing or just enjoying the scenery. Now, thankfully, a lot of the places we went to didn't require, weren't appropriate for an AAC facility, but we had a very good time wandering around and checking those places out. And in general, we always found some climbing. It was clear, no matter where we were, that Phil has a love of the land, whether it's jagged land or gentle land, but his appetite for scenery is quite large. And through that, I understood what I know is true and what we all know is true, that he has respect for all types of climbing, all levels of capability, and really all styles. And that's part of what's helped the club be more inclusive and grow. And I know his philosophy has been a big part of that. Pardon me. The other thing is that everywhere he went, he knew somebody. We knew somebody. We had dinner opportunities. We had lodging opportunities. So the fellowship and the friendship and the partnership that I saw through the lodging committee, I'm sure the rest of you have seen through every committee and every endeavor. That's really one of the great things that Phil has shared with the club, or at least, shared with me, and I really appreciate it. So I'm going to miss you around Golden, Phil, that's for sure. But I'm hoping I'll see you in a lot more places outside of Golden a lot more frequently. So thank you for what you've done for the club, and no doubt will continue to do for the climbing world.
Just to be clear with everybody, I have a bucket list. I've never climbed. I've been to the Dolomites. I've never really climbed there. I've been to the Bugaboos. I've never really climbed there. I've never climbed in the Needles of Southern California. I mean, there are places I need to go. So, start signing up.
All right, I'm going to do that.
Thanks, Cody.
It's so surprising to hear there's places you have not climbed, Phil.
Oh, there's more than that. There's a lot of places to climb in this world.
That's true. It's a good problem to have. Our next special guest is let's try that again. Our next special guest is Alison Osias, former AAC board president, our first female board president, senior editor at Rock and Ice with a very accomplished climbing career on the comp circuit, and in case you couldn't already tell, one of my personal idols. Alison, welcome to the celebration.
Thank you, thank you. The first time I really talked to Phil was nearly 20 years ago. It was at the International Climbers Festival in Lander, and you gave a really good rescue presentation. And I watched and studied, and afterwards we talked and connected, and I walked away, Phil, thinking that you really knew your stuff, but mostly that I just respected and liked you as a person. And that has always stayed the same. I always felt very comfortable and glad and grateful for how Phil carried himself and connected with people and represented the AAC. At our board meetings, Phil was prepared, he was candid and clear thinking. He could give the ED report, and then he could come out and climb with all of us. I came to think of you as the kind of person who can do just about anything. I still remember you saying at one board meeting, okay, this year I'm going to take on all the IT stuff. And at the same time, you were always very verbal and a great speaker and presenter. A lot of people have those skills, but not at the same time. And as Mark says, how many people have climbed K2 and done 513? When Phil had his accident, his climbing accident, I was heartsick. One night I was walking down the street in Boulder with two college friends who are respectively a doctor and a nurse practitioner. And they were objectively amazed by how fast and how well you had recovered. You bore your injuries with grace and bravery, at least outside of your house. Phil, I will say that you are one of a kind, and I'll miss your humor and how you seem to handle everything. And we gave you a lot, and I felt like I personally pestered you all the time because, oh, Phil will know. Phil can give me permission for this photo. I can ask Phil. And I want to say thank you, and that I'm still sorry about that time I needed a photo and I called you at Christmas. Thank you, good luck.
Part of the job. It's all part of the job, but now it's somebody else's job.
Can you give me his phone number?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I'll give you his cell phone, his pager, all that stuff. Thank you, Allison. And I'll never forget that first article you wrote in the back inside cover of Rock and Ice, where we made fun of Jim McCarthy, which was really the right way to start.
I don't even remember that part. I just remember that your face was pretty much it was a head-size photo on the page.
Yeah, yeah. No, we made fun of Jim McCarthy because the story was that the board was interviewing me and Jim McCarthy said something like, the bottom line is that I'm in charge. And I said something like, well, that's about to end.
We'll see about that.
Everyone laughed. Yeah, yeah.
I got to say, hey, Mark, it seems to me that when I think about it, I think of Phil. When I think about Americans who've maybe done K2 and 513, I can think of Phil, maybe Charlie Mace, Adrian Ballinger. I mean, it's a pretty elite club, Phil.
I think if Steve Swenson,
Maybe Steve,
if push came to shove, could
Yeah.
probably pull off a 513 or have in the
he
past.
may have done so. He's a good rock climber. Yeah. But still, it's not that many. One hand or two. Can fit him on one hand.
Basically, what you just said was everyone who's climbed K2 probably climbed 513 as well. That's what I just heard you say.
Lou probably has two.
Okay, Lou.
Yeah.
Got one on Lou. That's the only one I've got on Lou. Thanks, Allison.
Sure is a short list. K2 and 513. Our next special quote comes from Mike Reynolds. He says, Phil, on behalf of so many of us in the National Park Service, thank you for leading the voice of climbing and climbers, and for helping us manage parks and their opportunities for future generations. You've been a good friend for us, and all the best. Mike Reynolds, Regional Director of the National Park Service and former Superintendent of Yosemite.
I can't believe he sent you that photo. I mean, that's such a grown-up photo. I have so many good ones of him that are a lot less reverent.
Full disclosure, Mike didn't send that to me. I stole it off of the internet. He's a very Googleable person.
Good of you to not steal something worse.
Yeah. Our next guest is coming to us live from just up the road in Estes Park. Tom Hornbine is one of the most prolific mountaineers of our time, and probably of any time ever. He was the first to summit Everest via the West Ridge and is an author of a book by the same name, a great read if there ever was one. Tom, welcome to the show.
Hello, am I heard?
You're heard.
Good. And I'm blessed because I'm not seen.
I see you, and Gus is here. He sees you too. Uh-oh, what happened in the mute?
You clicked back on mute accidentally.
I guess I'm
There you go.
okay. In 1959, my age mate and good friend Nick Clinch made me join the American Alpine Club because they were sponsoring our expedition to Masherbrum. And I've been a dues-paying member for almost ever since. I hadn't put 2 and 2 or 15 and 16 together to realize that you moved here, Phil, just shortly before I left the Pacific Northwest and came to Colorado. And it wasn't long before I conned you into, Bob Craig and I conned you into becoming, at least briefly, a member of the Altitude Research Center down at the University of Colorado. And you, to return the favor, conned me into becoming a member of the advisory board for the museum. And I'd always sworn before then I would never get involved in anything that had to do with the politics of the American Alpine Club. For swearing. It was an eye-opening experience. I actually think we all did a little bit of something useful. It led to increasingly further involvements as the world evolved, and the most recent of which is with the good thorn in your side, Jim McCarthy and I were able to pursue our dream thanks to your somewhat reluctant at times help to start the Video Inspiration Project of archiving the histories of people like Donini and all, old guys who can still remember enough to reflect back on their lives as climbers. But although that's work business, the real pleasure that I'll get a little emotional about, but I've gotten out of these 15, 16 years is just getting to know you as a friend, to know Sarah and Gus in particular, but mainly you, as someone who has always been here for me, with me, and has encouraged and given me a hell of a lot of pleasure in watching the plot unfolds. You've got wonderful, great adventures ahead of you. I can tell from extrapolate from my own personal experience, but they'll be different and they'll be good. And I just wish you good journey on them. And thanks for being in our lives.
Thank you, Tom. You know, I have used you to my great advantage over the years. Half of my employees stay in their jobs just because they get to meet you a couple of times a year. So it's like, it's become a perk of working at the American Alpine Club. So I've used you to my great advantage. Thank you.
You're welcome. It's been my pleasure.
Heidi can attest to that very fact.
Okay.
Yes, that's true. I was just going to say, actually, the very first time I ever met you, Phil, was when you were in Portland for a wilderness safety conference. And you invited me to lunch with Tom Hornbine. And I was a nervous, starstruck wreck going into that lunch.
Well,
But you suckered me in.
One of my pleasures has been getting Heidi hugs, which I couldn't do now anyway. So
Virtual hug.
yes.
Thank you so much for joining us, Tom. It's always a pleasure.
My privilege.
Our next special guest comes to us in the form of a quote from Mim Nelson. She's currently serving on the American Alpine Club board. And Mim writes, "Families that climb together hang together through the good times and the tough times. Phil, you know this better than most. My entire family thanks you for your leadership and for caring about the diverse spectrum of folks who love to be in the mountains. We can't wait to see what comes next for you. Cheers and respect, Mim Nelson." And that's a photo of Mim's family there. Our next guest is live with us. We have Mark Cruz, who is former American Alpine Club president, and he is here with us live. Thanks so much, Mark, for joining us. I think
Mark, you're muted.
Be on mute. You're gonna have to start all over.
There we go.
The big button that says unmute. You can see my Tom Hornbine poster here in the back, and I didn't just put it there for this meeting of the West Ridge of Everest. So small world. So my relationship with Phil really goes back to the late 90s when I was on the Access Fund board. But I think we really kind of got going in 2007. I remember one night when Jim Danini and Steve Swenson, we all went out to the climbing gym and they took me out for a beer and said, "Hey, could you just kind of serve on this little committee?" And that began a now 13-year relationship with the American Alpine Club. And all of that with Phil there. There's a long list of things that I love about Phil. I'll keep it to 5. The first is his climbing resume. People have talked about that. Phil is a real climber in every sense of the word. And it was great to see him actually in a climbing industry job and not lose his enthusiasm for climbing, which sometimes happens, and that the passion for outdoor adventure burns bright inside of him. The second is resilience. And you fall 70 feet, you almost die, you come back. I was very involved with the board at that time. It was very scary, but it was really great to see that, he never complained, never whined about it. His commitment to his family and the club never wavered. And that kind of takes Alex Honnold's no big deal thing to a whole new level. So that was pretty impressive. Third is Phil's really articulate storyteller. He's always been just really good at painting a vision and bringing people together through that. His way to help inspire people and help them think, understand what's possible is really a special quality you have, Phil. And I think you've raised millions of dollars for the club using that superpower. Next, I would say Phil is just a really responsive listener. He's always done a great job listening, responding to complaints and advice and feedback. You know, anyone who can have a new boss every 2 years and then stay connected to an unwieldy 20-person board and pretty much keep everybody happy, that's quite a trick. So that has my respect big time. And finally, I would say Phil is just a really fast learner. I have always really admired Phil's ability to just listen and learn, and then just pivot super quickly. And I've seen this happen over and over and over in the last 15 years. I remember one time I was preparing Phil's performance review as club president, and I was asking for feedback, and I was asking a few board members, hey, what do you think Phil's really good at? And somebody kind of summed it up for me. They said, Phil is good at getting good at things. So I thought, well, what high praise. So that pretty much sums it up for me. Phil, I know that whatever you choose to do next, you will absolutely kick ass and do it well. And that you're going to just continue to just collect lifelong friends along the way. And I'm really proud to be one of them. Thank you.
Oh, well, thank you. And you did bring up the one thing I'm looking forward to. Not that I regret it, but I really am looking forward to not having a new boss every 2 years for the rest of my life.
I can't imagine. So, well done.
And Mark, I just want to ask you, how does this compare to your 60 episodes of TV learning with Martha Stewart back in the day?
This is way more fun, and I'll correct and leave it at that.
Thanks, Mark.
Talk to my agent. So
Thanks for joining, Mark. So Mark spoke to Phil's fall. Those of you who don't know, Phil Powers, after a miscommunication and a 70-foot fall, was left fighting for his life. You can hear more about that story in a special film called Family Powers, which you'll be able to stream. We'll drop that link into the comments towards the end of the show. It's only $5 to watch. Proceeds go to the AAC, and it's a 20-minute film, but it is a packed 20-minute film. I've seen it. I recommend it. It's a good insight into Phil's life. Also, I'd like to touch on another comment Mark made. He said that you never whined after the fall, and I think we might have to go to your wife, Sarah, just to verify that.
I don't think I whined. Sarah says no.
Wow. All right, there you have it.
I did do a couple of things along the way that she didn't like, but that wasn't whining.
That's natural in any relationship. Next, we have a quote written in from Greg Thompson, who is a current board member. Greg writes, Phil, it has been a true pleasure working with you over the past 10 years. I am really looking forward to spending some fun times together over the next 10 years. Well said, Greg. And thank you for writing in. Our next live guest is Carrie Roberts, who is a current AAC board member and is serving as our vice president. She is a firecracker of a human and is coming live to us, I believe, from New York. Is that right, Carrie?
The Thousand Islands, I think, is where she's coming from.
Yes, I'm on an island in the Thousand Islands, so I think my connection might be a little spotty this late. Can you hear me okay?
It's doing okay. You're a little jerky, but we can hear you.
Okay, all right, well, I'll give it a try. So, I mean, you and I met when I was in the Pine Club New York section. And are you still hearing me okay? Okay.
Yep.
So we met when I was a member of the New York section. hit it off right away. And a few years later, lo and behold, you invited me to join the board. And now, of course, you're abandoning me before my term is up, but that's okay. A lot of people have talked about your great achievements. You are one of my, you are definitely an inspiration as a leader to me, for all the things that you've done for the club, but you're also just quite simply one of my favorite people. Many things to like about Phil Powers. You're an accomplished climber, of course. You're a great conversationalist. You deny it, but you do have a certain amount of charisma. I mean, we've talked about this. And you have a fantastic family. Sarah is amazing, and the rest of your family, of course, too. And you have not one, but two just really fantastic pickup trucks. And that's pretty impressive. These are all wonderful things that we can all talk about when we talk about Phil Powers, but and these are all really important qualities. But what has made you really important to me as a friend is just the way that you inspire me, frankly, to live a great life. You have crafted a life for yourself that to me is such a clear expression of your values. And that is not an easy feat. We all want to talk about values, but it's really hard to hold strong to those. When I think about how you've spent your time as an individual, as a person in your personal life and professionally, I just see a really consistent themes. You have this strong commitment to the natural world. You show up for the natural world in real ways. You have such a big belief in community, the importance of community, and you're very committed to that. Education has been a cornerstone of your life, and that is not just about the educational programs that you've run from a professional perspective, but also the way that you bring people into the tent for climbing, even when they don't really know what they're doing, which was the case with me when I started out climbing and when we first met. You're also deeply committed to your friends and family. That is really evident. And finally, you have a natural curiosity about yourself. I think that has made you really open to new ideas and always questioning what the right thing is and how to accomplish that. And that, I see that in the way that you've led the club over the last few years as I've been a board member. This is a really chaotic time. That's an understatement. It is really hard for all of us to anchor ourselves, I think, during such chaos. And I think about your example very often, and the way that you ground yourself in your values. And I find that just an inspiration for myself. A lot of other people have talked about your specific contribution to the club, but I wanted to thank you for your contribution in just setting an example for me in the way that I want to ultimately live my life. So thank you very much. Oh, and I know we're going to stay very much in touch. So I hope to see you at my birthday party in September.
Oh yeah, we'll be there. Thank you, Carrie. It's been wonderful getting to know you and having you get to know my family a little bit. So yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you, Carrie, for joining us from the land of 1,000 lakes. Islands. Wrong geographical feature. All right, so if you are just joining us tonight, we are celebrating our outgoing executive director, Phil Powers. After 15 years, he is moving on, and we couldn't let him go without a proper send-off, albeit virtual. Tonight, we are joined by a host of special guests, but at the end of those special guests, you'll have the chance to do a live Q&A with Phil. So if you have a question for him, drop it in the comment field, and we'll have a few moments of Q&A. So be sure to stay tuned for that. All right, let's dive back in with our next guest. Joining us live is Justin Parks, who is a self-described OG homie, And as I would describe him, a rare beacon of light and happiness in the world. One of those folks who just you want to be around because he emanates happiness. He's currently serving as Knowles Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Manager. Justin, thanks for tuning in.
What's up? What's up, y'all? Phil, good to see you.
Hey, Justin.
How you doing? How you doing?
Good. I hope you won't be too mad at me. I drove through Lander this morning and didn't stop and say
I'm
hi.
actually kind of mad at you now. I would have, I was just kicking it. Yeah, I am both sad to see you go. I'll start with just saying that the AAC, the American Alpine Club, has meant a lot to me. You know, as I got into climbing, Devil's Lake was one of the first places that I spent time at. The Craggin Classics is where I met a lot of friends, and then came back to Chicago, and close friends were there, Avi, Myung, and Savvy, or Savannah. I actually remember when Savannah was like, hey, Justin, I'm so excited to try to work for the club, and do you know anyone? Could you connect me? And was like, yeah, let's get you in there. She got in, and y'all brought her in. And so like, I want to say thank you to the club, and thank you to you for checking in after she passed away. I remember the next day you had called, and then even after that, you popped in and really took care of Nina and Buck. And that meant the world to me, to like lose this friend, to have you there. So thank you, Phil. You've always been a mentor, a friend. Even in this photo that just popped up, we were in DC at Climb the Hill, and I was having a little imposter syndrome. I probably didn't show it because I was just out there living my best life and doing it. But, you know, you had just come up to me after that, put your arm around, took a photo. I think right before that, some newscasters were like, we want to chat with some folks. They were probably looking for Alex Honnold, but you decided to like highlight a BIPOC voice, which I appreciate. Yeah, so Phil, thank you again. And in general, I think, you know, again, as a young Black person from the south side of Chicago, or the hood, and I was like reading about mountaineering, and I'm sure I think your name came up, and you were climbing K2, and I was like, what? That's wild. I want to do that. Who's this person? And then I met you and felt like I was fanning out and being like, holy smokes. And then I realized you were just as goofy as me, and always held that space. Helped me hide notes at OR. You know, you talk about Phil too, AKA Phil Henderson, which has always brought me some joy in the power of the small guy.
You know Phil Henderson's my twin, right?
I know, y'all got that birthmark. I mean, you probably can't show it right here for indecent exposure. We don't want to do that to folks, but you know, folks,
we shouldn't do it right now.
Yeah, if you haven't seen it, ask Phil to take off his shirt at some point. He's got this birthmark, matches with the other homie. But yeah, you know, I think I'm so thankful for you and how you've checked in, how you've been there for me, how you've been there for our community. Sad to see you go from this position, but I also know that frees up more time for you and your family, and I'm excited to see what comes next. You've climbed mountains, you've led mountains of organizations, and who knows what's next. I don't think you're gonna slow down and stop.
Thank you, Justin. That means a lot coming from you. Are you in the Noble Hotel lobby or something right now? Oh my
gosh, how'd you know? I am in the Noble. No one's supposed to be in here, but this is my secret office. So as we do,
nice.
A couple rules and live our best lives. Yeah.
I remember the spot.
Oh, good.
Thank you, and thanks for bringing up Savannah. You know, that's been a big but unfortunate but real part of this job. Savannah was very close to us because she worked in the office, and we got to know her really well. But that's the loss of climbers over the years has been a big well, part of our community, but for me, it's been a big part of my life. And it's not been, I've not enjoyed that. I feel good about having been able to show up for people, but it's not, I hope Mitsu Iwasaki, who's taking the job, understands what he's getting into in that regard, because it's a dominating feature in this job.
Well,
But thank you.
Yeah, the words that you were able to gift me after that really helped me sit with it. I think it is a space that not all in our lives will understand how we get there. And it's hard, but I'm super appreciative of that space that you held for me.
Thank you. Thanks, Justin.
Thanks, Phil.
Thank you, Justin. And thank you for speaking to Savannah's memory. I know that's one that sits heavy with all of us. Next, we have another guest who wrote in, Phil, in planning this event, there was something that I realized very quickly, which is that you've touched so many lives. It is impossible to fit everybody into this one virtual event. I know while we have many guests and many more who wrote in, there's still so many more who we weren't able to reach out to, who you touched. And I just wanted to recognize that fact. I'm sure there's many people in the audience. I've been seeing the comments on the video just absolutely blowing up with love for you and for your career. So shout out to everybody who we weren't able to fit into the virtual event tonight. We do have another quote coming from Pete Ward, who is a current AAC board member and snapped this rather, dare I say, dashing, which is not a word I would ever normally associate with you, Phil, photo of you at one of our Climb the Hill events. Pete writes, "I hope there are many more pitches to climb together and many more meals to share. But what's most important to me now is to say thank you for everything you've done to support climbing. I will always be influenced by your leadership and grateful for the results of your hard work. Cheers, mate. Enjoy the next leg of the journey, Pete Ward."
Nice.
Thank you, Pete, for sharing that. Our next live guest is Matt Culberson, who is former president of the American Alpine Club Board and has a great Zoom holding photo. Matt, thank you so much for taking the time to join us this evening and sending off Phil Powers.
Thank you, Heidi and Phil. It's great to see you. It's great to hear people speak about you. It's an honor to take a moment. I jotted down some notes the other day and didn't like what I had to say. I jotted down some notes today. I really liked what I had to say, and now I've listened to everyone speak about you, and I'm leaving my notes alone. I'm just gonna say a couple of things because I think people have covered so much of what you've done in climbing and who you are as a person. I think I was listening to Mark Cruz talking about the challenge of having a new boss every 2 years, and you and I share that. It's the same thing in my job as well, and it's a hard thing. And I know I was your boss for 2 years, technically, and I know that was a hard thing. I liken the work you have to do in managing the board of directors of the AAC as trying to get everyone up rum doodle. It's big, man. It's so big. It's bigger than Everest.
It's not really there.
And it's not really there, but you're still trying to do it every time. That's right. And I think of the 25,000 members. How many members are there now, Phil?
25,000 and change.
The change counts. And I think all of us share one thing in common, because we're climbers and we are, as Touré would say, conquistadors of the useless. And so not only are you trying to get up Mount Rumdoodle, you're trying to get us conquistadors of the useless up there. And man, you have done a great job of that. you and I were both president of the American Mountain Guides Association, and I think that guiding has influenced my life, and I have seen you in your role here at the AAC as a guide for all of us. I think you've guided this organization. I disagree with McCarthy. I'm not sure it was tumultuous, though there was tumult, but you've guided it through a period of rapid growth, enormous opportunity. And I think you've reset the platform, not just for the AAC, but for American climbing and the role the AAC has in it, and what the AAC and the power of its membership can do. And you've done it with grace, Phil. You've done it with humility. You've done it with generosity. You've done it with kindness. And you've done it with the board with some impatience, which has been important as well. You are a fine human being. You're a great man. And I feel so fortunate to be able to call you a friend. I continue to aspire to be able to do what you have done in this organization, do what you've done in your life. I was 600 meters short on K2. I've only led 512, so I just not quite there. But it's an honor to know you, and I think all of us who have been associated with the AAC and climbing in America, so many people who don't even know how much you have influenced their life and the future life in the climbing landscape. So thank you for all you've done, Phil. I have missed not being part of the board, not being more intimate with the organization in the last year and a half, but I'm really proud to know you. And I wish you and Sarah and your family and Gus all the best. Take care.
Thanks, Mark and or Matt. And I've done that before. But I will, I do have to just counter that a little bit. Those are all very nice things to say, and I'll take them. But gosh, it's really been about so many other people. It's really been about. I think I was really psyched when Mark Cruz mentioned listening as something he remembers me for, because from my perspective, it's mostly been listening and getting out of the way and letting people with passion express that passion. But I very much appreciate what you said. It was sort of over the top. So thank you.
Well, here again is your humility, and you've been guiding. Sometimes you've guided from behind, but it's been great being on the rope with you. Take care, man.
Yeah. Thanks, Matt. Yeah.
Thank you, Matt. And, if you really miss being on the board that badly, we are always looking for good board members. I'm sure we could bend some rules and bring you back. Speaking of board members,
repeat offenders. We don't like repeat offenders.
Speaking of board members, our next write-in comes from Graham Zimmerman, who is currently serving on the AAC board and takes the cake for the best mustache on the board. Graham writes, over my years as a climber and AAC member, it has been outstanding to watch this organization grow and better represent our sport. Having joined in 2003, this has nearly all been under the leadership and guidance of Phil. I have immense gratitude for his commitment to this community, and while I am sad to see him go, I am also very excited about working with this club to build on his fantastic legacy. Words from Graham Zimmerman. Phil, you are so loved that during this live event, I had a special person text me and say, yeah, I gotta say some words to Phil. And so I have a special addition to the lineup, hot off the press, coming to us from Steve Swenson, who is only not here because tonight is also the Mountaineers' big gala. Steve writes, I want to thank you, Phil, for your dedication to the American Alpine Club and to your commitment to the staff and AAC extended community. The strength of the relationships you have built in the service of the club is a tremendous asset that will benefit the organization for years to come. Thank you so much, and thanks to your family for sharing you with the club all these years. Steve Swenson.
That's nice.
Isn't it? He's a good wordsmith.
Steve was my boss for 3 years, and he was a real pain in the ass.
All the best bosses are. Isn't that right, Phil?
I guess that's what they said, yeah.
Our next guest is live with us, Lou Reichart. He is former board president of the American Alpine Club, and according to Phil, the most likely former board president to win a Nobel Prize. Also, beat Phil up K2, which is quite an accomplishment. So, Lou, thank you for joining us. Welcome to the celebration, and props on hands down the best background of the evening.
Well, thanks. So Phil, I know this is supposed to be a well-earned tribute, but also it should be a little bit embarrassing. And so in this spirit, I want to congratulate you, Phil, as the club's chief servant, as you self-describe, and a personal friend, for reaching the highest summits, climbing 513, but also I should say for surviving one of the world's fastest descents with such good grace to your companions afterwards. This was really impressive. So as you know, I joined the club in 1969, and since its founding, the club had grown at about 20 members a year. At this rate, we'd probably I think there were two key events since I've been in the club. One was moving the club to Golden, for which I think both Phil and I know we owe Glenn Porzak a huge thanks. Otherwise, we'd be in some endless, empty, soulless warehouse that I spent a lot of time touring in the early 90s. The second, I would argue, is Mark Ritchie's vision that to realize our club's ambitions, the club needed a new effective director. And somehow Mark manages to persuade you to actually come take the job. I just say at that point, none of us could imagine that you would be so successful with membership now at 25 to 26,000, creation of endless chapters, purchase of campgrounds, expansion of our endowment and staff, new museum, collaborations with other organizations. So in other words, we've made the transition under your leadership from a social club to an advocacy organization. And we owe this in large part to you. I should say, in addition, my perspective is you've helped professionalize the board, nudge the leadership, somehow managed to keep involved our entire membership. What didn't happen though? I mean, what didn't you do? First, I should say the new website is kind of embarrassing. It lists members' ages. There's no cheating on this for people either looking for partners or for those like me who are an age like certain famous others. I must now assert my ability to subtract by sevens from 100. And I hope you all know who that famous other is. Secondly, I'm terribly disappointed that none of the frequent trips where I saw you to New York City.
Did we go climbing? I've known other people with these pauses.
Is everybody watching?
Is it working?
There
We got you. We got you back.
It might help if you turn off your video.
I'll turn off the video. Sorry, just give me a sec.
But we were poised on what you missed from my trips to New York.
Oh yeah, so on your trips to New York, you failed to persuade David Koch to lose his enthusiasm for carbon emissions. And I suggested perhaps if you brought some of that wonderful stuff you grow in Colorado and got him to inhale it, maybe he would have expanded his horizons. Anyway, this was clearly something that the world would be better if you'd
I tried everything with David, but you're right. I never offered him a joint. You're right. Yeah.
That's right. So look, I mean, you've made the club a organization that, in addition to loving it, it gives us a voice in the world that we need more than ever, with the earth, wilderness, and global climate under attack. You know, I'm very sorry to see you go. The club's going to miss you, but I'm also happy that your departure does not mean that you're disappearing from our lives. And so just many, many thanks.
That's true, Lou. Thank you so much.
All right, Lou, thank you. Keep working on that Nobel Prize. Our next guest is a write-in. Jed Williamson wrote in, Phil, I have a very high regard for you and your work. Know that I have been a supporter of yours from day one, even encouraging you to apply. We go back, way back. Love you and the work you have done. Be sure to call when you're in Vermont. All right.
Yeah, Jed, I had let my membership lapse at the American Alpine Club. I didn't think the club was relevant, and I wasn't even aware the job was open. And Jed called me up and he said, "Are you crazy? You need to apply for this job." And that's why this all happened. So that's all due to Jed.
So huge shout out to Jed. Thanks for making that happen. Wish we could have had you on board tonight, but again, we just have so many folks, Phil, whose lives you've touched. We could literally do this for 24 hours straight and not touch everybody.
So what's your point? Why aren't we doing that?
I can't sit for that long.
Just joking, just joking.
Our next write-in submission comes from a name I'm sure everybody knows, Jimmy Chin, Oscar winner, climber, photographer extraordinaire. This is a photo from my first expedition to the Karakoram. I still remember clearly sitting with you, seeking your advice on how to put together an expedition proposal and plan for this trip. The expedition launched my career as a photographer and climber. I will always remember your encouragement during those early years. Thank you for the years of friendship, mentorship, and of course, for your vision and leadership of the AAC. Truly grateful for your contributions to me personally and to our community. Hope to tie in together in the mountains soon. Your friend, Jimmy Chen.
That's nice.
As a big fan of Jimmy's and his work, you can tell by the photo of his that I have hanging here. Thank you, Phil, for helping make that happen. Huge fan.
Yeah.
Now, to bring us home for the live piece of the event, we have former board president, all-around rock star Deanne Buck joining us live right here to bring the celebration home before we go into the Q&A. Deanne, thanks for joining.
Thank you, Heidi. First of all, I just want to say you've done an amazing job on this. Really like streamlined audio on an hour-long Zoom. Hats off to Heidi and the entire team. Phil, I feel like I've seen you from every side. I was your competitor when you started your job. I was working at the Access Fund, and then I became a staff member and reported to you. And then eventually I became a board member and the board chair. And all of those were great experiences, but the best experience has been your friend. And I thank you for the friendship. Everyone has said so many things about you over the last hour and 20 minutes. And I could repeat everything that they said ×2, and it still wouldn't be enough. The other part about it is I feel like you invited me into your family with Sarah, Zach, Ramsey, Amos, Gus, and Ember. So thank you. And the one story I wanted to share is, this says a lot about, to people who don't know Phil, we've talked about his persuasion and how he can bring people along. And so I had applied for a job at the American Alpine Club, and it was outside of my skill set. It was a development director position. And I made it through the first round, and I think maybe I was like making it through the second round. I'm not sure. And Phil calls me, and those who have worked for Phil or know Phil know he can develop the worst news in the nicest way. And so he tells me, you haven't made it to the next round. But we have an annual dinner coming up, and there's going to be some other open positions. And so why don't you come to the annual benefit dinner? And you know what? I will give you a ticket for half price. And so I was like, okay. So I threw down my half price membership, went to the annual benefit dinner, and actually ended up getting the job and starting a really wonderful friendship with Phil that has gone over 10 or 12 years. So thank you for that. And the last thing that I'll say before I turn it back over to Heidi is the one thing that didn't get mentioned is your dance moves. I feel like no tribute to Phil can be whole without really mentioning the dance moves, which I heard about for a couple of years. I didn't believe it. And I'll say, I hope that there's many more of those in our future. And finally, as I turn it back over to Heidi, I have a question for you. I think when you think about the span of the last 15 years, you know, I think there are times when we can always open up or we close down when certain challenges come our way. And as you look over the last 15 years and you reflect on what was most important, what comes to mind first and foremost for you?
You mean most important over the last 15 years, anything?
Yeah, anything.
Upside, downside, intermediate?
Yep.
Well, first of all, I just want to punctuate one thing that you said, which is that if you want to be my friend, sometimes it's just half price. You know,
it was a true bargain too.
I can't even think about what maybe the greatest challenge was. There's been so many like hard parts to this. They've all been very palatable or reasonable. And the reason they've been reasonable is there's just two reasons. One is that I've had a great family. I've always been able to come home to a great family and been supported by that. And the other is that, and I'm going to take credit for this, is that I have a great staff. And I didn't have a great staff all the time.
When I was there?
Somehow, what's that?
When I was there?
You were not, I would say you were not in the top 10%. But somehow we've found a way to have a great staff. And I don't think that's all because of me, but it's got to be at least a little bit because of me. But you know, one of the things I've said recently is that, or I used to say I wanted to accomplish this or that before I left, whether it was, you know, raising a certain amount of money or getting to a certain membership or getting education off the ground. But now the reason I'm sad to leave is because of the staff. It's just a great group of people. And, you know, Mitsu Iwasaki, who starts in just a couple of weeks, that's the thing he's going to benefit from most. He's going to walk into a great situation. Well, there's money in the bank. That's nice. But even nicer is he's going to walk into a great staff. So, you know, the things that I remember are the people. It's just the people. I don't really remember the battles or the accomplishments or the state of climbing report or the policy zine we just published. It's the people. It's just the people.
Thank you. We'll miss you.
I'm not going anywhere. You're gonna see me. Everyone's gonna keep seeing me.
Definitely miss you in your role.
It's true. The adage is you can leave the AAC, but you can never actually escape. And Deanne, thank you so much for pointing out Phil's dance skills. You know, you are correct that no tribute to Phil would be complete without pointing those out. So I have a special video that I'd like to share.
Who am I? Oh, I'm dancing with the lead singer.
Oh, yeah.
It's just, you know.
These moves are straight fire, Phil. Straight fire. What is that hip shaking? There, for anybody who has not had the pleasure of seeing Phil dance, is a sneak peek. It is better in person. I recommend it. And now I'd like to take this opportunity to ask everybody to grab a glass, may it be whiskey or gin or a fine bubbly water, and raise it in celebration of Phil's 15 years at the helm of the American Alpine Club. Huge shout out, Phil. I've only been part of it for a few years.
Thank you, everybody.
Here's everybody. Cheers.
Cheers, Phil.
Cheers, Phil.
I gotta get to grid view. Oh, gallery view. There we go. Thank you, everybody.
15 years at the helm, still bad at Zoom. We love you, Phil.
I'm not that bad at Zoom. I mean, I'm worse than you, but.
For the audience who's joining us virtually, raise your glass, take a swig, celebrate the closing of one chapter, the beginning of the next. And we are going to go into a special live Q&A with Phil. So if you have a question for the man of the hour, drop it into the comment field on the Facebook event or the Facebook video page. And we're going to take a few minutes to ask a handful of questions. I'm sure we won't have time to get to all of them, but stay tuned for some questions. Let's see here. While we wait for the audience to drop some questions in, does anybody from the panel or from the celebration have a question that they would like to ask Phil?
I have a statement.
That'll do.
And that is that I think our next CEO, Mitsu Iwasaki, is going to be really great. And I just want to make sure that everyone understands that and does everything they can do to welcome him. And I think he's really the right next person for this job. And I just hope we all can get behind him in the way you all got behind me when I started. Well, maybe not all of you. I remember the very first board meeting I went to, I wanted to have a board orientation for the new board members. And I looked at Mark Ritchie and I said, now it's time for board orientation. And Mark said, let's go climbing, which kind of undercut the entire orientation effort. But I do want us to get behind Mitsu in a full-fledged way. So that's my addition to the Q&A, which is just an A.
We'll take it. And we have our first question in from the audience, from a name that you'll recognize, Phil. Dugald, our publications manager, always has the best questions, and this is no exception. Dugald asks, what 513 did you do, and has it been downgraded?
Oh, well, that's a really good question, because at the time, the 513 was addiction, and it has been downgraded to 12C. But the same month I did the Throne, which was 13B, and it's not been downgraded.
Saved by the bell.
Saved by doing two.
Yeah. Thank you for that question, Dugald. If others have questions for Phil, drop it in as a comment on the Facebook page there. We have another question. Phil, you were at the helm of the club for 15 years, and you certainly saw your fair share of ups and downs. What was the biggest challenge that you faced during those 15 years?
I mean, honestly, I guess I'll say two things. There were definitely times we got out ahead of our skis on finances. And I remember it must have been 2010 or 11 where we're not meeting our budget. And people took pay cuts, and it was actually harder than the pandemic stuff because everyone's going through it now. But back in 2010 or 11, when that happened, that was really devastating to me to be in a situation where in order to make the budget work, I had to ask my staff and take myself pay cuts to make it work. So there were some tough years. But the other thing I would say is the kind of ongoing drumbeat of tragedy in the climbing world. Losing friends, losing acquaintances, sending people off on expeditions. Not that I sent them or we sent them, but they might have AAC grants or funding, and then losing people that way, or being on the phone with Global Rescue late into the night, helping them figure out how to rescue someone in Pakistan. That ongoing drumbeat of tragedy and grief has been a real burden for me. I think I've been good at that. It's a weird thing to be good at, talking to family members who've lost their kin in climbing accidents, and talking to, spouses who've lost or looking for lost climbers. But I guess writ large, I would say that's both the biggest downside and honestly, almost the biggest upside too, because I've had some of the most intimate conversations of this time with people in those circumstances. And the one thing I would say about that is that I'm really pleased that the Climbing Grief Fund exists, and that it's thriving, and that it's going somewhere, and that the film is out, and that it's actually turned into something. It turned into a conversation about this thing that we didn't even talk about 15 years ago. We didn't, if someone died, we just talked about how they died. Like, what was the mistake that was made? What was the thing that happened, as opposed to the grief itself and the tragedy itself. So that was a little bit wide ranging, but that's my answer.
Fair. I'm glad we have the grief fund in place now to help support that ongoing loss that we as a community face. So thank you for that. We have time for just a couple more questions, but first I'd like to read a comment that our incoming Executive Director Mitsu Iwasaki just dropped into the comments because it feels fitting. Mitsu writes, "Thank you for all you've done and for your support. So very grateful to be following your legacy at the AAC."
Yeah, I don't buy that. I don't buy the word legacy. I think legacy is a bad word. I think I'll have to have Mitsu rephrase this for future events.
I'm just curious, as a staff member who will be working under Mitsu moving forward, can his dance moves hold up next to yours?
I don't know the answer to that, but I guarantee you he will be a great boss. I guarantee you he will be responsive and capable and smart about how he handles the place.
Looking forward to it. Pete Ward has a question for you. He says, "What specifically is your excuse for not quitting last year and using that time and your charm and dance moves to run for President of the United States? This troubles me and needs explaining."
I do think I'd be a good president. I mean, look at the playing field. I think I could do a better job. So, yeah, maybe.
All right, I'm offering now to head up your campaign.
Yeah, you and me, Heidi, we can do it.
We got it. All right. Longtime AAC volunteer and bartender extraordinaire Lee Smith writes in, whereabouts in Vermont, Phil? If I pass through, can I rope up with you?
Oh yeah, we've got plenty of space. Putney, Vermont. Give me a call. I know the local crags. I'm all in.
There you have it. Our next question from the audience comes from Jim Head. He wonders, Phil, is there any one accomplishment during your tenure that you are most proud of?
I mean, there's so many. That didn't come out right.
Very humble.
But the one thing that really bumps up to me is changing the name of Accidents in North American Mountaineering to Accidents in North American Climbing. It might sound like a small thing, but just acknowledging the way climbing has evolved from the superset term being mountaineering, where the concept was what we did was get on top of mountains. It was such a limiting concept. And the fact is that climbing is just so much different, so much more diverse. People climb for all reasons. They climb for all, in all styles. And calling it climbing it was a big deal for me to call it climbing and not mountaineering, to include whatever it was, whether you climbed out of bed in the morning or up a 14er or went bouldering. If you thought of yourself as a climber, we wanted to be part of life with you. And so that was a word change, a single word change in a title. And it might not seem like that big a deal, but when you ask that question, that's what I remember. That's what I think of.
All right, 15 years all boils down to a single word.
Fair.
You're selling yourself short. That's one of the many things. So since you are the man of the hour, and this is a celebration of your storied career here at the AAC, and honestly in the climbing community at large, what I'd love to do is let you have kind of the last word here, and just hand the mic over to you, Phil. You've got 15 years that you're putting a bow on here, so the floor is yours.
Well, thank you, and I'm not sure I can add much to what's been said tonight. I really do. When I started this job, my thought at the time was, I'm going to use the American Alpine Club to change the world. And for the first 10 years, that just wasn't even possible. The organization was not what it needed to be. And the politics, the small politics about inconsequential things were holding us back. And, but I really believed in bringing people along. And so I didn't use those first 10 years to try to change the world. And I'm not sure we're changing the world today, but I will say that the things that I've seen the club do in the last few years begin to touch on that original vision that I had. The fact that the club is a player in climate change policy, the fact that the club is a player in helping people get out to vote, the fact that the club is a player in articulating issues in the key states in the November election that have meaning for climbers, the fact that the club can convene people around issues that are bigger than climbing. Those are the things that have most meaning for me. I can't speak for the future. I can't say that that's the direction of the club going forward. But for me, getting motivated people like climbers together around issues that really matter for our planet is what matters most. And I put the grief fund in the same category. The way we deal with trauma and grief as human beings. The way we separate that from first aid and put it in a different category is what doesn't make sense to me. Having conversations about loss, having conversations about grief, those are important things. So in just the last few years, I've seen the club begin to do some of the things that I envisioned in the beginning and really couldn't make happen for a long, long time. And I don't think I've made them happen either. They've happened because, of our policy staff like Taylor, because of our policy committee, because of people finding a way to make the club a platform for doing good in the world. And our world is troubled. And, we have to be clear about the fact that we are a club for climbers. That's all we are. But these issues affect us. They affect climbing. And, I think it's a little bit token to talk about climate change and the way it affects ice climbs. But if that's a way in, I'll take it. The fact is that the club has become a voice for the issues that are most pressing on our planet. Notably climate change, notably equity. I really do think that the equity conversation can be let. I wouldn't say the club should be a leader in this conversation, but climbing is a great example of the ways in which people have been excluded from aspects of life. And I think we need to play a role in changing that, remedying that in a proactive way, not just a welcoming way, but there has to be some equity here. So, I feel like I'm kind of leaving at a sweet spot. Like we just in the last few years have we been able to begin to express ourselves as a positive force in the larger world. We'll see where it goes. I have every belief that Mitsu will want to carry that torch forward. But for me, that's been the most flavorful part of this and a lot of it's been motivated by staff. Staff have been pushing. They've been pushing from their positions, like we got to do more. And that's been really fun for me to both receive that and hear that and enliven that, and also be able to kind of mediate that as it enters the sphere of politics with the board and other organizations and things. So for me, to finally see the club begin to manifest the vision that I naively thought I could bring to the organization in the early days, for me, that's been a really rewarding last few years.
Well, glad that you can end on a high note. And I feel very inadequate being the person to kind of summarize or attempt to encapsulate everything that's been said this evening, especially when stacked up to just our amazing lineup of special guests and many of those who tuned in that we weren't able to include into the live event. But thank you for steering the AAC in such a positive direction and for setting us up into a place where we can really launch into the future and hopefully move forward in a lot of those very important areas that you mentioned, climate change and DEI work and just supporting the climbing community as it changes and grows. So from all of us staff, board, climbers across the country and the world, Phil, thank you for all that you've done.
Thank you. And I'll just end by saying it's been really fun. I really enjoyed it.
Excellent. Especially all those 80s dance parties, am I right?
And other things that we don't have to talk about.
Well, for those of you tuning in from all across the country and world, thank you for joining us for this very special edition of Clubhouse Live. If you want a little more insight into Phil Powers and what makes him the man who runs Climbing in America, as we like to joke around the office, I recommend checking out the film by Chispa House called Family Powers. It is the story of a miscommunication and a 70-foot fall that left Phil fighting for his life. You can stream Family Powers today to watch the miraculous comeback story fueled by family. It's just $5 to watch. 100% of the proceeds benefit Your American Alpine Club. We'll drop that link into the comments for you all. But thank you everybody for joining tonight, for helping us attempt an appropriate COVID virtual send-off for you, Phil. Thanks everybody.
Thanks, Heidi. Thanks, everybody. Good night.